Hello, everyone. This is Afrometrics research-based news, just giving you an update on the major research publications of this past week that are relevant to the Black world. This week, the New England Journal of Medicine featured an article written by 5 scientists who work in the area of genetics and medicine. Akinyemi Oni Orisan, Yusef Mavura, Yambazi Banda, Timothy Thornton, and Ronnie Sebro. Their article was about the use of race in clinical practice and biomedical research and the debate over its usefulness in medicine. It's a debate that's resurfaced in light of new anti-racist initiatives around the country. And according to the authors, there's a strong correlation between a person's continent of ancestral origin and their self-identified race. Therefore, race has both a genetic and a social component, an argument that contradicts the notion that race is simply a social construct alone. For example, certain medicine doses have been found to differ in effectiveness and safety based on racial classification, racial identification, and the genetic factors associated with African ancestry compared to European ancestry. There have also been racially targeted interventions like those targeting Black barbershops, which have improved hypertension in Black men. And according to the authors, it's clear that genetic differences exist between people who belong to different socially constructed racial categories. To summarize the plea of these genetic scientists, they argue, and I quote, "We do not believe that ignoring race will reduce health disparities. Such an approach is a form of naive color blindness that's more likely to perpetuate and potentially exacerbate disparities. Although ignoring race could improve equality by leading to identical medical treatment for everyone, we believe that equity is necessary to address disparities. We urge our colleagues in medicine and science to refrain from haphazardly removing race from clinical algorithms and treatment guidelines in response to this recent initiative attempting to combat anti-racism." So the primary argument that this article is making, the study is making, is that treating everybody the same is not always treating everyone fairly or equitably. And this is a group of Black scientists, geneticists, who have come together to publish this article in the New England Journal of Medicine this past week. The Washington Post highlighted data from the new Bureau of Labor Statistics report. January's data, it showed high unemployment rates of 8.5 for Black women, 8.8 for Latina women, and 5.1% for white women. And it indicates that the pandemic has hit Black and Latina women hardest. This data is important because many advocates are calling for targeted employment policies, economic policies for Black and Latin women. So because pandemic-related shutdowns have hit hotels, retail, restaurants, and education the hardest, areas where Black and Latin women are overrepresented, they've been hit the hardest as a consequence. We also know that 41% of Latina mothers and 67% of Black mothers are their family's primary or sole breadwinners, meaning that their job losses are more likely to have a larger impact on their families and communities. Again, the data increasingly calls into question the one size fits all approaches to increase employment among all women, which seem to leave Black and Latin women disadvantaged. But what are these policies that would particularly benefit Black and Latin women? Well, as the Post article states, and I quote, "For example, because Black women carry more student loan debt and are more likely to be evicted than any other group, and they'll benefit particularly from executive orders extending the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures and continuing the pause on student loan payments. Similarly, low-income Latinas are disproportionately likely to be uninsured and have benefited significantly from the Affordable Care Act, which increases their access to insurance coverage. As a result, they're likely to make further gains from Biden's executive order strengthening Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act by opening enrollment, federal health care, and marketplaces and directing federal agencies to re-examine policies that block or impede health insurance access. Back to the area of health, a new study was published in the Research Square entitled The Aggressiveness of African Breast Cancer, an expose on the CD44 and CD24 low breast cancer stem cells. This is very specific medical language. So the lead author was Eric Gaina of the University of Nottingham School of Molecular Medicine Sciences. And the study was conducted for a very important reason. Although it's known that breast cancer in Africans and people of African descent is generally more aggressive with poor prognosis, worse clinical outcomes, the molecular basis for this racial disparity or these racial disparities is not well understood. The stem cell known as CD44 and CD24 are known for their potential aggressiveness and being associated with poor health outcomes when it comes to breast cancer. And this study investigated the relationship between the CD44 and CD24 stem cells and breast cancer outcomes in an African population. More specifically, the participants in this study were 222 Ghanaian women with breast cancer. And the results showed that combined, the CD44 and the CD24 stem cells were, as anticipated, associated with poorer prognosis and more aggressive tumors, and may contribute to tumor aggressiveness in African breast cancer. The CD24 stem cell by itself, not in combination, but by itself, was found to be correlated with clinical and pathological indicators of tumor aggressiveness and poor prognosis. Similarly, a new prostate cancer study was published in the Journal of Prostate Cancer and Prostatic Diseases. The article was written by multiple authors, including the lead author, Francesca Kuhn, and their investigation compared follow-up appointments, adherence to medical instructions, and clinical outcomes of African and Afro-Caribbean men in the UK who were on active surveillance for prostate cancer at a high volume UK hospitals compared with other ethnicities or men of other ethnicities in the UK. They consisted of 450 men, and 23% of that population were men of African and Afro-Caribbean descent in the UK. The results showed that the African and Afro-Caribbean men in the UK were less likely to adhere to scheduled appointments, but they were also found to be potentially at higher risk of disease progression, which signaled the need for careful selection and monitoring of African and Afro-Caribbean men on active medical surveillance for prostate cancer. However, the conclusions were not definitive as the results were not statistically significant. So the authors suggest the need for more research. A new study was also published in the International Journal of Social Work. It was published by Sharina Sasa, David Okech, Yoon Jun Choi, Larry Nakarud, and Tanisha Littleton. The authors investigated the effects of social exclusion, and that I'll say a little more about social exclusion. It's the social, cultural, and economic institutional exclusion of immigrant population. But they investigated the effects of social exclusion on the mental health and the well-being of a sample of 409 African immigrants in the United States. And the research is important because African immigrants all over the world face exclusion and discrimination. But in the United States, compared to other immigrants, African immigrants are more likely to experience skill devaluation, underemployment, discrimination, and lower earnings despite their human capital and their labor participation. So they face both white supremacy, anti-Blackness, and anti-immigrant sentiments as well. And these kinds of discrimination are associated with increased risk of psychosocial disorders among immigrant groups. The study found that social exclusion increased depression and anxiety symptoms, decreased their levels of social trust, increased their isolation, and increased their worries about safety. And that's particularly among African immigrants in the United States. Ultimately, the authors explain the need for social work interventions that target discrimination and structural social exclusion to try to improve the mental health and the well-being of African immigrants in the United States. They argue that there needs to be a deeper understanding of the unique cultural nuances among diverse African immigrant populations, because they could benefit from both researchers and practitioners having more targeted initiatives. And it can also inform the design of distinctively tailored interventions to meet the needs of these groups. A new study was also published in the Journal of African American Studies. Its authors were Jacqueline Dowling, Renee Mahaffey Harris, and Rian McDade. And the study was an examination of the effectiveness of African American based nutrition intervention initiatives. Particularly, they looked at Do Right, Nutrition Train the Trainer. And that's the name of an 8-week series designed to educate participants on the importance of nutrition. The authors examined the post-intervention health knowledge and behaviors of participants that they gained as a result of experiencing the program. Again, the name of the program is Do Right, Nutrition Train the Trainer. So the evaluation showed an increase in the participants' health knowledge and skills. The specific knowledge and skills that they gained as a result of the program were in the areas of portion control, effective meal planning, how to read nutrition labels, eating healthy on a budget, and food safety. Again, if you want to look that study up, it was an effective study published in the Journal of African American Studies. Thank you, everybody. This has been an Afrometrics research-based news brief. You can visit us at afrometrics.org. See you all next week.